Hello, everybody from Geneva. My name is Sarah Hess, and I work in the Health Emergencies team here at Headquarters WHO. I work in the EPI-WIN team, so the WHO Information Network for Epidemics, and I'm very happy to welcome you today to this webinar that we are hosting alongside a large number of youth representatives, as well as representatives from 3 other UN agencies, UNESCO, UNICEF, and UNFPA, and we're very happy to be here. A few housekeeping before we get going. The webinar is being recorded, so we'll be able to share that following the webinar. And we have a Q&A function in the Zoom, so if you are joining from Zoom, please do submit your questions to the Q&A, and we will try and get to some of those towards the end of the webinar. We have a very tight schedule, and so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the first speaker on our panel, and that is my colleague Melinda Frost, who is the team lead for risk communication in the infodemic management pillar of the COVID-19 response here at WHO. And Mindy is going to tell us a little bit about why we're having this webinar. Mindy, over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. I'm particularly excited to introduce this conference for today. When it comes to your generation, the young adult, the youth generation, you're going to be unfortunately affected in different ways than other generations by COVID-19. You have more of an economic impact, possibly. Your future, your job, the way you work will all change from this moment on. But it's important because you actually also have an opportunity to change the way we all work, the way we all function in this world from this moment on in COVID. Today we're going to be talking about the infodemic. I want to just take a moment to talk about the epidemic. When we're just talking about health and the way we're thinking about the disease and COVID and the spread of disease, your generation really has an important part to play here. The groups that you interact with, the way that you work within the world, the environments, the settings, where you go out, who you work with, and so on. You may not see the disease itself affecting you and your friends right now, but the way you approach the world and the way you work could help. You could help very much stop the disease spread, which will affect other people in other generations. So I go from the epidemic into the infodemic. And much in the same way the virus is so dangerous, spread of mis and disinformation is also dangerous. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. WHO has done a lot of work about managing infodemics. It's the overwhelming amount of information where people can't find the answers they need to the questions they have. And so it's difficult to spread good information versus knowing what bad information is and how to avoid spreading that. So when we're talking about this, at WHO, we're kind of focusing on 3 different audiences coming up in the future. One is aging populations, those at high risk, and then your generation, the young adult generation. And there's several ways in which we need you to help in this process in combating infodemics. And one is by communicating the risk. You have networks, you have ways of reaching individuals and unique ways of working, and you've taken this charge before. Your generation has taken on challenges and environmental concerns and racial equality, and you've done this without asking. And now you're going to actually be asked to do something to help. We need you in this. So spreading the word about how individuals can find and see their own risk in their daily lives, whether it's going to a crowded location or knowing the environment you're in, where there's virus, where people have been sick, and avoiding circumstances and taking safety precautions, washing hands, using masks when appropriate, and spreading that information. We need you to be able to do this. Another way is by engaging with your communities, and communities can be anything. It's not just the neighborhoods that you live in and the environments that you work in. It's also social media and social networks. And then finally, having media and information literacy and working with your networks to describe what that is. Again, how to spread and use good information and how to stop spreading mis and disinformation. Lots you can do, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mindy, for that great introduction to this webinar. I'm going to hand over to one of our colleagues at UNESCO, Marco Zhu, who is the Associate Project Officer for Media and Information Literacy, for some comments. Marco, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So at the beginning, Mindy just mentioned that the fight against COVID-19 involves a fight against the disinformation and the misinformation. So what should be our weapon? We cannot be on the battlefield without the necessary competencies to know how to critically and ethically access, produce, and interact with information and media content. So this set of competencies is called by UNESCO Media and Information Literacy. So MIL is a prerequisite and a sustainable way to cultivate critical thinking, to enhance access to reliable health information, and as a result, to save lives. So UNESCO considers and engages with young people not only as beneficiaries, but also as partners and leaders. In the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been leading and supporting a variety of youth initiatives and actions related to media and information literacy. Now I would like to name a few. So first, the Youth Committee of the UNESCO-led Global Alliance for Partnerships on Media and Information Literacy consists of a group of youth leaders in the field of MIL from different regions. And with the support of UNESCO, the MIL Alliance Youth Committee has carried out a range of initiatives to combat the pandemic, including a series of webinars, a COVID-19 information guide, and also supporting the youth survey on COVID-19 in collaboration with WHO and some other youth organizations. One of the GAMIL youth ambassadors, Beatrice Bonami, is with us here today. Hi, Beatrice. She will tell you more about their initiative in the next panel. So second, learning of media information literacy takes place very often outside of classroom. So UNESCO has been fostering peer education among youth and informal education through social media. During the outbreak, we have produced several series of social media learning graphics on topics such as facts versus opinions, information overload, quality journalism, etc., which we have been disseminating through different youth networks and through our MilClicks social media channels. We have also held a set of MilClicks webinars with the MIL Alliance Youth Ambassadors. I can share some of the mentioned links in the chat box later on. And third, UNESCO has organized the Code the Curve hackathon, which engaged young people around the world to design digital solutions to flatten the curve through programming. Maybe some of you here have participated in this competition. But if you have not, don't worry. You will have the opportunity to participate in the Global Media and Information Literacy Hackathon that we will launch in October within the framework of the annual Global Media and Information Literacy Week, which will be celebrated from 24th to the 31st of October. And this year's theme is Resisting Disinfodemic, MIL for everyone and by everyone. Its components related to youth also include an international youth webinar during the International Day for Universal Access to Information in the end of September, as well as an online youth forum during the last week of October. I invite you to stay tuned and check our website for updates. So I would like to end my very short presentation. I had only 2.5 minutes with a positive note from Marshall McLuhan. A breakdown leads to a breakthrough. We are at a significant moment in time for critical thinking, for media and information literacy, and for youth engagement. So let's keep it up and let's win this battle together. Thank you very much, Sarah. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Marco, for your inspiring comment. I'm now going to hand over to a colleague, Danielle Engel, who is a technical specialist in adolescent and youth team lead at UNFPA. And Danielle will talk a little bit about what UNFPA has done with regards to engaging young people during the COVID response. Danielle, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I would just continue where Marco stopped in saying that indeed the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown us an unprecedented challenge. But we are coming together, the world is coming together to combat this virus. We are confident that we can win this battle. And we feel that young people, or we know that young people play a critical role in this collective challenge. And in many areas, young people are already mobilizing, and the mobilization has been phenomenal. And we will hear from many of you later in the next panel of all the great work you have been doing. I'm actually pleased that I'm not only representing UNFPA in this panel, but also the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action, which is a collective of now over 60 humanitarian agencies and actors coming together to work with and for young people in humanitarian action. Obviously, the COVID-19 crisis is a global emergency and has mobilized us immediately. And so in May, early May, the Compact members came together and worked on an operational guide on how do we work with and for young people in the COVID-19 context. And that guide is online. You can see it on the screen. It is structured around the 5 key actions of the Compact, which are services and programs for young people in humanitarian action. The second one,
Danielle, we lost you.
is
briefly.
looking at participation focuses on building capacity. Okay, so I was.
We have you back again, so it's fine.
Okay, sorry, shaky internet connection here, even though I'm sitting in New York. So I'm just, and I'm happy that the slide is now on, so you can see the 5 key actions of the Compact. I will not go into the details. It's service, participation, capacity, resources, and data. You can find more of this, more details on the website of the Compact, which is youthcompact.org. Sorry, but I think it's what we are discussing here today is the risk communication and community engagement, which is a critical element of the outbreak response, and was also has also been addressed in the Compact guide, which I really recommend you all to look into. But it's also really an area where we feel that young people can play a significant role. And engaging young people effectively in risk communication and community engagement is also a critical part of the UN crisis response plan, and also UNFPA's agency-specific crisis response plan. We are putting young people at the center of our response. And you see it on the screen, we are following 3 key strategies. And the first one is know young people and their experience. And that really stems from the recognition that not all young people share the same realities. As many activities move online now with lockdowns and restricted movements in place, digitally connected youth are relatively better positioned to adapt and respond. However, we cannot forget young people living in poverty, isolated, or hardest to reach, people who are experiencing various forms of marginalization. And effective risk communication and community engagement also needs to work for them. And we need to make sure that our work is not leaving anyone behind. The second one is spread the message, and that is about sharing information, clarify misinformation, while engaging young people in the process, giving the right information in the right hands, in the right format, and not doing any harm. We are having UNFPA's, many of you have already participated in the UNFPA campaign, hashtag Youth Against COVID, where we had young people who were spreading the right information based on WHO recommendations in their languages and in their customized to their own realities. And then my last point is intensify support systems. So once we have spread the message, once we have engaged young people, we need to make sure that we complement information with services and build the social support system around it in an inclusive way. And again, I would like to end by recognizing the enormous work young people have been doing since this epidemic started. And I'd like to end with the same hopeful message that Marco had, that I'm really confident that together we will win this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And now I'd like to hand over to the final representative from the UN agencies, and that is Carla Dar, who is an emergency specialist and co-lead of the COVID-19 Global Interagency Risk Communication and Community Engagement Response at UNICEF. Carla, great to have you on the line. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah and colleagues. Happy to be on the line. So I'll ask you to go straight to the next slide. But just to start by saying that UNICEF is happy to be in this call because UNICEF has children and young people at the core of its mandate. And we support young people a lot in the COVID response to fight this virus and play a proactive role to really reach out to young people in their communities, try to raise awareness, persuade them to uptake the healthy behavior that they need to uptake, and providing them with tips and encouraging them to take action. So in outreaching to adolescents and youth, we support young people to identify the groups of young people at risk. And that is by connecting them to networks of young people, be it in the medical field or the Red Cross or other youth networks that are being proactive in this COVID response, and how through these networks they can reach out to the most marginalized, not to really forget the people that are most in need, such as the refugees, the migrants that live in refugee camps and slums, and find it really hard to actually follow the public health measures that are recommended by the World Health Organization globally and the governments and health authorities at country level. So once we supported young people identify those at risk, we also support them in conducting consultations to identify the needs of those young people. So what are the needs? Are the needs information related? So is it information, what young people need to be able to uptake a protective behavior against COVID? Or some other young people have the information but are simply bored from just following up the public health response. Sometimes it's summer and they want to enjoy and go out. Sometimes they simply do not have the luxury to implement those measures because, as I said, they live in camps. There's a lot of people. They are not living in normal settings. So what is it that we're doing to actually communicate well in a contextualized, language-specific and language-tailored approach with those young people? We provide all that support. Step 2 is once we identified the young people, we identified their needs, we as UNICEF and other UN agencies, I see my colleague Daniel and also Mindy have said almost the same things. We provide young people with the right information, the scientific and most up-to-date information to be able to raise awareness among their peers and their communities. And we educate them by providing them with the skills that are needed, be it communication skills, be it persuasion skills. You know, if you want to influence people to uptake certain behaviors, it's not easy. It's not one conversation that will convince your friend to actually stop going out or to actually be distant or to actually wear a mask. You need to enter a debate. You need to persuade them. You need to hear their concerns, respond to their concerns. And all of that require trainings. It's not like all of us can do that without being trained. And UNICEF can provide those training. And step 3 is engage. Once all of that is done, what is it that the young people want to do? What are the initiatives that they feel like doing? Do they want to work through radio stations, TV stations, influencers, social media to fight misinformation, etc.? What is it that they want to do? And we provide them with support and tools to do that. In the next slide, I'm just going to talk quickly about some of the examples that we have done to engage young people in countries. We have really done a lot to establish networks of volunteers in many countries to fight COVID. And basically in Colombia, we've done that. In Cote d'Ivoire, we've established a network that has been working to reach 1 million young people weekly through a radio program, for example. And you can see the picture on the right-hand side of the slide. In Montenegro, we have a network of volunteers that helps through UNICEF, the National Institute for Public Health, in their stay home campaign, through which they actually support the elderly, older groups, to deliver to them groceries, but also information, but also help them, stay at home and protect themselves. Next slide, please. Similar initiatives in other countries are taking place. The next slide will tell you more. If somebody helps me go to the next slide, please. So as you can see in Brazil, our office is recruiting volunteers digitally who help fight misinformation online. No, can we please go back one slide, because it's quite interesting to tell young people what's going on in countries. Can we go back one slide, please? Yes. So in South Africa, we have deployed 2,000 youth volunteers with the aim of reaching at least 50,000 with the right information. In Bangladesh, we have launched the hand washing challenge, in which volunteers are being asked to develop, to come up with videos, and the ones with the highest reach win some sort of like profiles with UNICEF, etc. In New York, we have in 72 hours supported the establishment of a volunteer network of 1,300 people who have supported bridge the divide between young people and the elderly by providing them with support, groceries, medicine, but also information. Same in Madrid, the UK, where also in 24 hours we were able to mobilize 400,000 volunteers to support the National Health Service in their initiatives against COVID in Syria as well. Next slide, please. In the next slide, you will see that we also help promote all the messages, fight misinformation through digital engagement. So the next slide will show you that we do that by, working with youth influencers. We are also part of the global, webinars that the United Nations Secretary General envoy on youth, together with a senior, like the Director General of the WHO, Executive Director of UNICEF, are holding quite regularly to speak with young people about their mental health around, COVID issues and many other things that we're doing digitally to make sure we propagate the right information and we fight the misinformation. The next slide will just give you the resources that I've been talking about, the steps that I've been talking about in my first slide, the trainings, all of the resources are in the next slide. You can just go to the link. We will share this PowerPoint with all of you to find all those resources and all those links on the slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carla. I just want to draw people's attention also to the fact that some of our colleagues are putting some links into the Zoom chat so that you can find the resources that are being referenced. We've now moved through the first part of this webinar, and we will move into the second part, which is where we will hear from youth representatives themselves about some of the amazing work that they've already been doing, engaging in the COVID-19 pandemic response. And the first youth representative that we have with us today is Satvik Sethi, who is the founder and chief executive officer at Runaway. Satvik, it's really great to have you. Over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone else for being here today and for advancing the conversation on what is an incredibly important topic. Today I'm going to be talking about two projects that I've been working on. The first one being Project COVID. And I started building this app back in February when COVID-19 and the quarantine was starting to turn into a reality for all of our lives. And I was just online one night trying to look for information and resources. And the first thing I realized was that this information and the resources were far too scattered for anyone to actually be able to find everything that they really needed to take on the pandemic. And the second problem that I saw was what some of the colleagues have spoken about earlier with the spread of misinformation, fake news, and the infodemic. So we built this app using a lot of college students who volunteered to help us, and we were all complete strangers before starting out on this, but we just had this common mission and a passion to try to help the world out through this quarantine and through COVID-19. And so we built this app that is now currently available on the Apple App Store for both iPhone and iPads. And basically we provide a lot of verified and reliable information and resources, such as educational toolkits, mental health resources. You could check for your symptoms on COVID-19. Currently in the United States, we also provide local testing information, and we have a live global outbreak tracker for the entire world. So you could actually look at live statistics and recovery rates from every country around the world, and that is available globally. Some of the sources that we've used in constructing this include the World Health Organization, CDC, Harvard University's medical school, and every piece of information on this app has been extremely thoroughly vetted by our team, as well as through external resources. Moving on to the next slide, please. So the second project that I've been working on is Runaway. It's a social venture for mental health that aims to make the world happier. And I've actually started this project 4 years ago when I first came to college, and have been working on it every day since. But basically the goal here is to just promote mental health awareness and work towards breaking down the stigma that surrounds mental health. Especially with COVID-19 and physical distancing and quarantining, we've seen that it has taken a huge toll on people's mental health. So our goal really was to reemphasize to people that as Runaway, we're always there for our community, and we want to do whatever we can to help people take care of their mental health. And for us, that began with extreme amounts of community engagement. So while we can't really host physical events, we wanted to share information and resources for all our followers, not just pertaining to COVID, but also for any movements. We shared a huge list of Black therapists during the Black Lives Matter movement and things of that sort. We've been participating extensively in podcasts, panels like this, virtual events, to basically open up dialogue and conversation on the impact that COVID-19 has had on mental health, specifically for students. And we've also been creating a lot of social media and blog articles to spread awareness on various topics. The second aspect we've been focusing on is partnerships to ensure that our community always gets access to free virtual therapy, free live virtual guided meditation, as well as content collaborations to reach more viewers. And finally, we've been working on developing our mobile app that'll have free anonymous one-on-one peer support where people can come online and talk to a student volunteer about their mental health problems, as well as have a lot of free resources, educational toolkits, and virtual events. So basically with Project COVID, we wanted to re-emphasize on the infodemic and try to support people by finding the right information. And through Runaway, we wanted to keep the community engaged. And we've kept telling people that we just have to physical distance, but we don't have to social distance. And we're always here for our community. And I personally, as a youth activist and a mental health activist, will not stop till I know that the world is happier. And if anyone has any additional questions or just wants to learn more about these projects, my contact information is at the top right of the slide. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Satwik, for taking the time to share with us the incredible work that you are doing. And in order for people to see clearly your contact details, I just want to reassure people that we will share a copy of the slides to all those who are on the call today after the webinar. I'd now like to pass to Sargis Gazarian, who's the International Coordinator in charge of advocacy and partnerships of the YPeer network. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for leading this, and thank you everyone for all of the presentations. I'm Sargis, and I'm very glad to be here. And I would like to start a little bit of what UNFPA also mentioned in their presentation about the Youth Against COVID-19 project that was done with Prezi. That was one of the projects that YPeer itself got involved to. So I would like to a little bit talk about how vibrant and beautiful the project was, because it really included a lot of items in the topics that was not really talked about when it came to safe sex, safe practices, when it came to young people, LGBTIQ+ community and their rights during the pandemic period. And I think the project was really fulfilled. It included 6 consecutive videos that were developed by many organizations. And I think that it had a lot of good impact to young people and a lot of national communities, because it had a recycling button. So everyone could basically just recycle the videos in their native languages. So I think it was, and there's still like a lot of activities to share the videos more and to share valid information about things that are not really talked about when it comes to sexual and reproductive health and rights. A little bit more of YPeer's involvement in the process of COVID-19. Due to this project, I think a lot of national networks took part and shared the videos in Russian and Arabic for the Russian and Arabic communities. And there was a lot of interest when it came to safe sex practice. We had a lot of questions and a lot of questions about HIV testing and a lot of STDs testing that we clearly do not have this kind of information from social media. So there was a lot of need just to distribute information that is much more than that. YPeer itself has 34 active national networks in all over the world, in Arab states, in Eastern Europe and Central Asia and Asia Pacific, that are working constantly on mobilizing young people when it comes to COVID-19 and how to arrange social media and in-person activities to share information and to distribute valid points when it comes to SRHR. YPeer furthermore contributed to the list of UNFPA about the challenges of young people that are listed in order for UNFPA to pass it on furthermore to authorities, for them to analyze and to develop a survey to include marginalized communities such as transgender people, pansexual people who are not really listed in the people who are affected by the virus. So I think that it was a good contribution, and I think there is still a lot of progress there needed to be done. Overall, there has been a lot of social media awareness campaigns and a lot of attributions to sharing information about safe sex practice. And focusing on the questions that were highlighted for us, I think it's important to notice that the information that has been shared has been quite enough, but I think there is still a lot of room for disseminating the videos and the information when it comes to that, because we can see that there is still the pandemic is still not over, and there is still so many challenges around the world when it comes to young people. So I think there is still need of a lot of support when it comes to disseminating the information, including the authorities, because when we have authorities on board with a lot of support of other international agencies, I think the information could be more trustworthy from the local young people. Thank you very much. This is it from my side.
Thank you so much for joining us on the call. I'd now like to hand over to May Nasrallah, who is the Technical Youth Coordinator in Jordan for the Norwegian Refugee Council. Welcome to the call, May, and we look forward to hearing about your work.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining. It's really exciting to see so many people excited to talk about youth. So just a little background about what we do in the NRC Jordan office. So we work in the field in camps and host communities with refugees and vulnerable Jordanians to target the most vulnerable and marginalized youth and support them in accessing livelihood, being socially engaged, and engaging in learning and education. So already everything we do falls under the framework of the compact, which Daniel presented earlier. So we used when COVID happened, it took us by surprise, like everyone else. But then we were quick to use the compact guidelines on working with and for young people, which have been endorsed as the Interagency Standing Committee guidelines, to ensure we are engaging youth in our response to COVID from the get-go. And what we did is we adapted our programming. And the way we did it is that, first of all, we took a step back, assessed the situation, did a rapid assessment with the young people, got evidence and data, and then adjusted the modality of what we offer. So we began offering training to young people over WhatsApp to ensure young people remain engaged and that their access to learning does not get discontinued. We also had the young people lead their own response through supporting social initiatives. So one success story we have that I'd like to share with you is a group of young people, mixture of nationalities, Jordanians, Iraqis, Syrians, and genders, in host communities up in the south in Jordan, who led their own initiative to spread awareness about COVID-19. So they distributed masks, raised awareness on hand washing practices, and put up flyers to spread information to their community. This same group made so much positive noise that it ended up making an agreement with the municipality and became part of the team that supported the municipality in going out and ensuring the community being supported and following the guidelines. Another thing we did is we used the compact publications on working with and for young people and the COVID-19 guidelines to coordinate with other youth actors during this crisis. So one of the things we did is, in partnership with the UNFPA, UNICEF, UNDP, and UNHCR, we shared the guidelines and advocated for youth inclusive response during the COVID crisis. We did meetings with the Ministry of Youth and other stakeholders. We also had a webinar, which was very well received, where we shared the guidelines and gave practical examples of how to respond in a way to include young people during this time. So as Danielle mentioned, the guidelines are translated into a number of languages and have very concrete examples that can inform the response. You can download them from the Youth Compact website, which I already saw some of my colleagues sharing the link to in the chat box. I think, of course, this is a very brief overview of what we did, and there are numerous examples of many ways young people themselves took initiative and responded to the crisis and shared information. So there's much more that I can't tell you in this short period of time, but I'm very happy to answer any questions or share resources if you reach out to me afterwards. And thank you.
Thanks so much. And I totally agree. We don't have enough time to hear and really understand the full depth and extent of the work that young people are doing. But hopefully we can continue these conversations and share what we're doing further. I'm now going to hand to Mary McGraw, who is from the Global Shapers Dublin Hub. Mary, lovely to have you.
Hi guys. Yeah, so my name is Mary McGraw, and I am the Communications Officer at Global Shapers Dublin Hub. The Global Shapers community is a network of young people driving dialogue, action, and change, both in their communities and globally. The community is an initiative by the World Economic Forum. So you can go to the next slide just to talk about some of the campaigns that we've been going through. So the first campaign I would like to bring attention to is the hashtag I Know COVID-19 campaign, which was an initiative started by the Global Shapers Copenhagen Hub curator Lahiru, and it involved a slew of European hubs as well as hubs around the world to get to tackle misinformation, both on social media and through collecting rumors that we have been seeing on social media. So we had a Facebook group set up where we collected rumors, and we then presented that in a report to WHO Europe, as well as we had a webinar series with a representative from WHO Europe. And then we had a 6-week social media campaign tackling myths and debunking myths, and kind of giving information on treatments and vaccines, all being fact-checked by our lead at WHO Europe. And then I've also been involved with content creation for the COVID Youth Survey, which is still going on. So if you want to take the survey, you can go to covidyouthsurvey.com. We're still collecting data, so highly recommend if you can. You can go to the next slide. So just some top tips from a content creation standpoint about how to get involved in tackling misinformation, get involved in like campaigns, campaigning against misinformation, especially with COVID-19, is starting with your voice. You have your own unique voice. Don't be afraid to use it and to speak up for what you feel is important. People will recognize your authenticity, as well as like figuring out the voice for your campaign or the campaign that you're getting involved in. I think it's important to answer some questions. So like start with the who, what, where, when, and why. And then we can like answering those questions to its fullest will really give a well-rounded campaign and give you clarity on what you want from your campaign. What's your outcomes? What are some tangible aspects that'll come away from it? Secondly is creativity. Be creative, especially with social media campaigns. You know, having that visual storytelling component is so important and can be a really good way to empathize with your audience, especially with young people. So, you know, find inspirations, whether it's other campaigns that are effective and that you really like and you see are gaining traction. Find aesthetics that you think might work with the campaign, but also allow yourself to explore different mediums and modes and be creative. Like even if you're not from a design or artistic background, there are plenty of templates through canva.com, Adobe Spark, and different Adobe features that are really accessible for anyone and really help you visually communicate your story and communicate your idea effectively. The third is networks. So we all belong to communities and networks. Don't be afraid to reach out to people about your ideas or your campaign to help spread the word. So whether that's through your school, your sports teams, your youth organizations, any kind of network, your family, your friends, you know, continually spread the word throughout your campaign And you'll never know who will come out and provide support, provide resources, help you spread the word, help your campaign reach more people. That was really effective in our hashtag I Know COVID-19 campaign. The more we gain momentum and, the more we spread the word, we gained visibility with WHO Europe, and they ended up sharing a lot of our content on some of their social platforms, as well as the headquarters for Global Shapers community. So, don't be afraid to tap into those resources if you really believe you're onto something. And even if it's at the beginning and, you haven't gained that traction yet, continue to reach out throughout your campaign. And lastly, always be learning and growing through your campaign. An important part of bringing to life an idea is to be open to growing and going back to the drawing board throughout the process. So design thinking strategies is a really good way to kind of think about it. Design thinking is, ideation, brainstorming, prototyping, feedback, going back to the drawing board and refining. Don't be afraid to send out a campaign with it being 80% of what you want it to be. Don't try to strive for perfection, strive for growing throughout the entire process, and that will give you a really robust campaign. You can ask me on my Instagram at Mary McGraw if you want any more tips for content creation. And I hope that kind of invigorates people to get on board and really add their voice to this spreading of stopping the spread of misinformation.
Thanks, Mary. Such valuable tips for everybody and an inspiring talk. Thank you for sharing them with us. I'd now like to hand over to Beatrice Banami from the UNESCO Gap Mill group. Beatrice, lovely to have you.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello to you all. I am Beatrice Banami from Brazil, Youth Ambassador for Latin American and Caribbean countries by the Global Alliance Partnership for Media and Information Literacy, aka GAPMIL, a program led by UNESCO. I would like to thank the World Health Organization for hosting this webinar and inviting GAPMIL to be a partner in this initiative. The coronavirus pandemic created both a health and informational crisis that there are vast amounts of data and resources available about the disease, mainly online, yet there are inequalities in countries, predominantly among the global south. In some countries, this struggle has also become a political issue. For example, there are locations where the actions of wearing or not wearing a mask shows a political orientation rather than a responsible attitude to contain the spread of the virus. In Brazil, for example, we have a unique set of challenges since it is a very diverse country. Most of all, our battle against the virus is not only fought in hospitals, but also against mis and disinformation in local villages, hamlets, and marginalized communities, especially in the Amazon rainforest. You can pass on the next slide, please. However, we have a hope called education. As Paulo Freire, a Brazilian author, said, there is no way you can teach someone to read a book that doesn't also enable one to read their own world. With that in mind, we from GAPMIL began various worldwide campaigns to foster resilience among networks and empower people to fight against this harmful pandemic. We, the Youth Ambassadors, launched the Health and Information Literacy Access Alliance, aka HILA Alliance, with the purpose to break the disinformation cycle about COVID-19. With my fellow GAPMIL Youth Ambassador for North America and Europe, Bushra Badi from Canada, we launched funding campaigns and initiatives to overcome famine and unemployment and begin media and information literacy action plans in India, Uzbekistan, Liberia, Nigeria, Jordan, Canada, and Brazil. This is an example in the slide of a campaign in partnership with Brazilian indigenous communities. We successfully reached them by phone, by community radios, or sometimes even with local stakeholders. Universities and institutions such as United Nations and the HBO that raised enough money to feed almost 1,000 native families in the forest. So sponsor local communities and educate people how to deal with life during and post-pandemic. Now it's time to see what the youth can do around the world to contain the virus spread by researching what are the main informational resources and how people can fact check them. Next slide, please. The survey launched last week with IFSMA, the movement #MoreViolentThanTheVirus and Global Shapers, will synthesize information of people around the world with a special focus on youth, the engine of our future. We will consider data contextualization of each geography, and hopefully we'll be able to deliver an insightful report by 12th of August, the International Youth Day. Our pluri-partnership model focuses much on Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is lifelong education for all, and SDG 17, which is building partnerships and networks, and among other SDGs, of course. Together, we hope to understand this and misinformation to prepare ourselves not to let a pandemic like this striking us again. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. May we be safe and strong. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. There were a couple of comments that came through earlier in the webinar about working with young people in lower resource settings, and I think you spoke very aptly to that. I'd now like to hand over to Ian, who is the founder of More Viral Than the Virus. Ian, great to have you. You're on mute, Ian.
Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. Yeah, so More Viral Than the Virus. What is it about? So at the beginning of the pandemic, youth was said to be invincible to COVID-19. That is obviously not true. And as a medical student like myself, and with other medical students, we wanted to help, but how? We can't treat any COVID-19 patients. So essentially, we thought that, look, education, media and information literacy, we felt that, so we have a social responsibility to share the key messages of WHO from youth to youth in an attempt to try and curb misinformation among people our age. So essentially, More Viral Than the Virus, this is a initiative that we started in response to WHO Director General Dr. Tedros's message to youth, saying that you are not invincible, and that with this, More Viral Than the Virus became a global COVID youth movement at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic on March 22nd this year, with mostly medical students. And then today we have been represented by youths in over 100 countries, and we managed to do this in just 10 days. And now we've established a network of young people from our different initiatives during the pandemic, and now our initiatives have reached to over 1.5 million people and counting. So now, as you can see from my slides below, our movement has helped to address various pertinent issues such as misinformation, mental awareness, worrying attitudes that some young people have adopted towards the crisis. But with the interest of time today, I'll only be focusing on how we manage misinformation, particularly with our local movement. So let me just give you an example. So if you look at the yellow box there, which is our local movement. So MVTTV Mexico, again and again, this is an inspiring example that I would like to say, a team of 4 people, we just started a movement, but this was the first initiative that they had. Michelle Navarro, our lead for MVTTV Mexico. So basically, they compiled, most of the COVID-19 information for myths, that WHO has dispelled, all in English, but then they understood what is the misinformation that's happening within their own society, what is happening in their community among youths. So essentially what they did was they, they basically got together all this myths and basically translated into Spanish, and then they try and curb this. And this had such response, as you can see, over 450,000 people reached and stuff like that. This was the first initiative. So what I'm trying to say today is that, youth, those who can, we're trying to get more people to understand, the importance of understanding the impact of COVID-19 within our community whatsoever. So essentially, we need to work together with healthcare stakeholders like WHO, UNFPA, UNICEF, UNESCO, with their work for media information literacy. So this is one example that I really want to share, and do not stop if you have just started a movement, because you can reach this, okay? And then if you would like to move on to the next slide, please. All right, so if you want to start a local movement, do reach out to me. And right now, the situation in Latin America, it's more than ever concerning. So we are trying to start more local movements. So if you want to help combat misinformation together, please reach out to me below. So now, with the next slide. So I just want to talk about my sharing at the start of the pandemic. I said youth were said to be invincible. Okay, now, my question to you is this, that, I believe WHO, all of us are trying to ask ourselves, are you still scared of being infected by COVID-19? So answer the survey, because we would like to know what is your thoughts on this, because your responses will help WHO, UNESCO, other stakeholders, even your own national health authority, to help shape the approach to use. And by filling out the survey, there's so much that can be done, and this could help shape your life in the future. So we urge everyone to fill the survey, and we want you to be heard. Thank you so much. This is all I have to say for now.
Thank you so much, Ian, and I hope that you post the link to the survey into the chat so that people can quickly access it. I'd now like to hand over to Saad Ouakas, who is the liaison officer to student organizations for the International Federation of Medical Students Associations. Saad, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and I guess you can stop sharing your screen so that I can show my slides. And it's great really to see hundreds of young motivated people attending today. And let me tell you something, you, my friends, are the hope and the heroes that can make a change and an impact in your communities. And the sole purpose of this webinar today is to encourage and inspire you to do so. So this is what we want. So for that, I would like to start by sharing some opportunities and challenges that we have faced as young people working on COVID and against misinformation, so that you can learn from this and do your own work. I start by challenges. The first thing that we have been facing is not being heard as young people. You see, we young people do actions in communities, we interact with the population in low resource setting, and then there is decision makers who make the decisions, and there is this gap between us and our actions not being heard. So that's a real challenge that we've been facing. The second challenge is the hard settings that we have been working on. Today, as young people, we have been separated from our families. We have been stopping our jobs, our education. The population that we interact in also live in hard settings, people losing their jobs, people being depressed, being stressed, having hard conditions. So being able to interact with those settings is a big challenge. And those are modern problems here. And with modern problems comes modern solutions. So I'll talk about opportunities. And the first one is networking. As Mary said, today we have these amazing UN agencies that you can find in your national level, you can interact with. You have all the youth networks today that are present and with which you can interact. So make sure that you go and reach out to other people, other youth agencies, the UN agencies, and you work together, because alone you can never do change. And my second and final opportunity or advice is the use of digital era. Today we have very broad, use of digital tools, digital ways for education, for improvement, for reaching out to people and affecting people. So make sure to use the digital tools and empower yourself when it comes to digital use, and use it as a tool for your work. So my name is Saad Ouakas, and I am the liaison officer to student organizations in the International Federation of Medical Students Associations, IFMSA. I hope you can see my slides here. And basically, I'll be introducing to you our work when it comes to fighting COVID and fighting disinformation. So basically, my first slide is about the work on fighting disinformation. And what we've been doing there is mainly focusing about fact-checking. So we did a map of international fact-checking organizations in 120 countries, and we have up until now 180 organizations. And with Rayson University, we are now putting it online, and WHO was also helping with that. The second initiative that we've been working on is working with Amazon to make Amazon design an artificial intelligence software that will be labeling articles online. And we're working on them to train that software and engaging youth in working on that. So as well, that's the second thing we've been working on when it comes to fact-checking and fighting misinformation. And I'll be talking more about the survey later on. The second thing I want to talk about is our work on COVID. So basically, what we've been doing is that we did a library to share resources and information from WHO, CDC, and other organizations about COVID, training manuals. Also, we had some interactions with other organizations like the UNFPA. We've been partnering with them in the Youth Against COVID campaign. And there will be another version coming soon in the next 2 weeks. So keep an eye in UNFPA Facebook and Twitter accounts. Another thing we've been doing is the webinars with the WHO COVID Envoy and with other organizations. We've been trying to represent the voice of youth and medical students in different webinars. Also, we've been doing support for our members, support for young people when it comes to medical education. Against there was a huge disruption, so we've been trying to support that and partner with different online and digital tools for medical education to try and support and offer young people education tools and support. So those are some actions that we did, and here you can, there is also, I'll be sharing in our website the link of our work in IFMSA, and you can see the work that medical students did in more than 95 countries and examples of their work on COVID and misinformation, and you can get in touch with them. And these are some numbers that you can see of our works over, as I said, 95 countries, projects against COVID-19. And now let me talk finally about the survey. And here I would like to say that it has been 4 months with COVID. And if you only heard 1 or 2 rumors per day or false informations, that would make it 300 false informations up until now. And nobody is doing actions against that. False information spread from population to population. And we young people are part of this population. So it's important for us to step in and do some action against this misinformation. This is why the first step we did is design the survey to hear your voice as young people. And you can see that it's from young people and to young people, and it's for you people to take the action yourself. So I'll be sharing the survey link in the comments and also in the questions and answers. Ian already did that. And you can please go and share the survey, fill it. It only takes 1 or 2 minutes, and go ahead and share it in your social media. We still have 1 week and we hope to hear your voice. So thank you for giving me the floor, and you have the floor, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Saad, for a passionate and cool way of presenting. Prezi video, we're gonna have to learn from you. We've now, I just want to say congratulations to all the young people here today who shared with us the incredible work and energy and passion, all your inspiring initiatives. What we'd like to do now is have a little bit of time for conversation. And I think a really important point for us to talk about is the fact that the invitations for this webinar went out to existing networks. So we're already reaching young people who are engaged already in one way or another. So how do we reach and work with young people who are not engaged, who are not aware of their opportunities to engage and of the potential to be involved in all the exciting work that you're doing? And I wonder if some of the young people on our panel can speak to this. And I'd like to start with Satvik. Do you have any comments to make on this?
Hey, so sorry about that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways where youth can be engaged, not just through UN agencies, but I just think in general for organizations with the resources. And I think the first and most important step is to identify youth projects and grassroots movements that go beyond the online space, because I think for a lot of us, it was relatively easy. Like I connected with UNICEF because they saw some of my work that I was doing in the mental health space online. And I was invited to be a speaker at the Leading Minds conference in Florence last year. But I've come across so many interesting projects and organizations that still don't have an online presence, and they might be in developing countries with not much access to these resources. And I think it's important for UN agencies and other organizations to kind of utilize their local assets to actually get in touch with these organizations and see how they can be supported. The other big aspect for youth-led projects specifically is that we have a lot of passion and we have a lot of energy to get things done, but at the same time, we mostly lack capital. And it would be really cool to see organizations like UN agencies kind of either provide us with some sort of funding to work towards these projects or connect us to all the organizations that they work with who might be interested in providing us some sort of kind of leverage and some sort of financial help to really scale our projects beyond, within our own communities. And finally, I think giving everyone a platform like this is incredibly important. And I'm always so grateful for these opportunities because I think we have a lot to say. And, you know, we've been doing a lot of work within our communities. And I think platforms like these and panels like these are very important in opening up those conversations. But something that I do want to see more of is not just getting us on these calls when it has a youth specific focus, but also, you know, letting us join these adult calls, so to speak, where our input is just as valid as the person sitting next to us, because at the end of the day, these are all things that are impacting us every day of our lives. And for us to be able to share our own ideas and thoughts on everything going on in the world is incredibly important, and equally important as when talking about things that directly affect us.
Thank you so much. Some very useful takeaways, especially for us UN organizations, and we will definitely take those to heart. I wonder if any of the other panelists would like to make some comments about this session for reaching young people. So I just, please,
yeah,
Harry.
Thank you very much. This is one of the questions that I think is very sentimental, I guess, in this period, because there definitely is a lot of people who are not really included in the process of activism and knowledge sharing and experience sharing. So I think it's very crucial to identify all of the grassroots organizations, and including public authorities and also national authorities on board, and to utilize all of the resources of other youth organizations that work on board for these issues related to COVID-19, to just make sure that we have bigger representation of the issues that are being talked about. And as I mentioned earlier about the survey analysis that is being done in regional based, and I think that it could be very important to underline the ways that the need of the support is needed for other young people, because hopefully it will represent bigger part of the population. And as coming from an organization that works on sexual and reproductive health and rights, I think that I would definitely just be glad to see more focus on sexual and reproductive health and rights when it comes to further activism and COVID-19, because I have, and our organizations have seen a lot of lack of it. So I think that the way that the support from youth to UN organizations and public authorities could be circulating also around human rights and sexual rights, which could be very important in this case. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, really great comments. Anybody else? Mary, do you want to make some comments on this?
Yeah, just really quickly. I mean, they really covered a lot of really good outlets. So I won't add too much, but just coming from a creative standpoint, empowering youth through like art and artists as change makers, I think can be a really good way to empower young people to really take hold of and take agency over their voice. So, you know, whether they're connected to an organization or not, you know, speaking to your friends or your friends' kids or things like that, and empowering them through creative outlets to let them kind of embrace their voice, and then also let them know that they have agency to be in dialogue and be in these conversations, is a really good way of engaging in youth. We've seen over, especially in the United States, how youth can be incredibly impactful from the ground up on certain issues, and just allowing them that platform and that creativity to grow and to add their voice can be really empowering. And so I encourage everyone on this call just to even think about in their own families, in their own communities, how are you engaging with your children or your nieces and nephews or your cousins? And, you know, can you help them find their voice? Can you creatively, allow them to become storytellers and engage with them in that way to help them join the conversation and feel very enlightened and energetic about this conversation.
Thank you very much, Mary. I'd just like to say that we've had some great comments and takeaways for the UN organizations here, and I'd like to open it up to see if there are any more that we can take away not only for the panelists, but I think it would be wonderful. Probably what we were going to do after this webinar is in the follow-up email to all those who've registered and participated, we will probably try to share a registration sheet that people, if they are interested in being involved in the conversation about how we can build collaboration, how we can reach organizations that are not being reached or engaged or who need more support, how to do this, how to support young people, bringing them into the conversations more and more and engaging them very meaningfully. I would really welcome everybody who's interested to be a part of that conversation to put forward their name, and we will definitely do that in our follow-up. In the meantime, I'd like to open up to some of the other panelists who might have some direct requests for the UN. What does meaningful support and meaningful engagement look like to you? Ian, do you want to make a few comments?
Thank you, Sarah. I'll try and make this quick. So essentially, again and again, as with my sharing earlier, the need for us to value solidarity and collaboration, especially for our generation. A lot of us are coming up with wonderful initiatives, but we need to come hand in hand, and that's with other organizations and also particularly, if we can, UN agencies like WHO, UNESCO, so on and so forth. So an example I want to bring up, which is, we are really privileged, Antivirus, we're really privileged in the sense that we had this opportunity to collaborate with global shapers, IFMSA, UNESCO, GAPMIL. So this is an opportunity given by WHO and UNESCO for us to, formulate this COVID youth survey together. This survey can basically, get the attitudes of youth, find out what's going on, and share it back to the stakeholders. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is, we don't, meaningful support from the UN is essentially being able to work hand in hand, being able to be heard, and being able to help support the UN if this is the area that they're lacking in. Youth, we do not asking for monetary, we're not asking for any funding. We did this COVID youth survey with 0 funds, and we are able to now have 2,000 responses. Money can't buy that. With word of mouth, yes, but money can't buy that. And the thing is, I'm just trying to extend this example to other UN agencies to give opportunity, like what Sarah just said. This is a conversation where we're trying to recruit different organizations or the movements who are starting up who would like to help at a higher level. This is an opportunity so that hopefully other UN agencies are able to willing to open up. And one quick example that I'm trying to say is that we need to work hand in hand, and I think this is all I have to say as of for now. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ian. May or Sad, would you like to make a few comments with this regard? I know I think we have somebody's phone in the background. But in any case, I'll continue. Potentially, let me just see who that is. I'm not sure. Can anybody else hear the phone ringing? Okay.
Not really.
All right, well, we'll continue then. May, would you like to make a few comments?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Sarah, for such a great and difficult question. I think echoing what everyone else is saying, there's a lot we can do. I think us as individuals, UN organizations, and as a global community. And I think one thing that would be of good support and meaningful is having a unified and consistent global response that is youth inclusive. This also must mean inclusive of the most marginalized and the most vulnerable, and many of whom do not have access to any devices, internet, and are not literate. So we must ensure that our responses do not further marginalize and leave behind young people who are already isolated. So just the push to be inclusive. Another thing that I would encourage UN organizations to do is for all of them and their partners to disaggregate their data by age. So we could identify needs among young people. So we have very little data about young people because data is not disaggregated. Having that sort of data would be a major achievement to all youth programs. And actually feeds into what I was mentioning, which is reaching the most in need and marginalized. Another thing we need is better coordination on services for young people. We have a sector approach to humanitarian response, and because youth is a demographic and not a sector, so not like livelihood or education, youth usually end up falling into the cracks. So there's a need to push for a multi-sectoral coordinated response that is led by the UN to ensure we're looking at youth holistically. In Jordan, UNFPA and NRC actually co-chairs the only youth coordination group in the country looking at refugee response, which is the Youth Task Force. And it operates in Za'atari refugee camp. For those of you who are actually interested in knowing more about this coordination group that only operates on the Za'atari on a camp level, I will share a link of their most recent newsletter in the chat box.
Thanks so much for sharing that, May. I'd like to pass to Saad. If you have any comments, I know we have a couple of questions coming through in the Q&A, well, more than a couple. We'd like to have a little bit of time to address those, but Saad, if you'd like to contribute to that question, please do go ahead.
For sure. Today, I feel really privileged and responsible. Privileged having a family that can afford me a living place and a laptop with which I can connect, while other people have to work to make their living. And I feel responsible as a young person to help and represent the voice of those people who didn't get the chance that I got. So I would say that meaningful engagements and support for those young people would start by first opening our arms to those young people, saying to them that we are here for you, we are here with you to hear their voice, to hear your concerns, and then work together with you so that we can, solve your problems and engage you to solve your problems. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is hearing and representing the voice of youth, giving them a platform in which they can express themselves. A lot of young people are doing some really amazing work in the grassroots and community level, but their voice is not heard when it comes to advocacy level, when it comes to policy making, advocating for change. This is the lack, and this is where UN agency support is needed, so that the efforts that's done by youth can be scaled and represented and heard in the decision-making level. The third thing is giving opportunities for volunteering and internships for young people in UN agencies, and also facilitating opportunities of internships for in other organizations, so that those young people can build their capacity, can grow, can create their networks, and invest their energy in a good and optimal environment. And finally, I would say support the networks, the regional and international networks of young people, because those networks, like for example, IFMSA, GapMail, Global Shapers, and other networks, they are in touch with young people. They try to engage with young people. So supporting them indirectly helps them get better work done in the local level with young people. So that would be my recommendation. And yeah.
Thanks very much, Saad. We're now going to move over to a few of the questions. I know we're a little bit over time, and but I think it's important that we do address some of these questions. Just before we do that, I do want to just add that on the 12th of August is International Youth Day, and this is a wonderful day to really highlight some of the work that young people are doing. And so I know at least at WHO we will be for sure trying to do that. So we'll be able to share some information about that shortly. My colleague Peter has been following some of the Q&A, so I'm going to hand over to Peter now, who has collected a couple of the questions. Peter, are you able to? Great, we can see you. Over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, very much. Very briefly, and thank you very much to all participants for their active contribution to the question and answer box. We have tried to answer some in writing, and definitely, as Sarah mentioned, we'll be following up by email. But I have tried to compile some interesting questions, and hopefully they will answer many of the participants. So I'll just share 3 of them, and then panelists can feel free to answer them. So the first one is that many participants that were actually asking how we can fight misinformation, fake news at different levels when it comes to COVID. And of course, what are the credible resources that we should be using? The second question comes to resource usage and spreading. So can you recommend some reliable resources when it comes to capacity building of young people in risk communication and community engagement? And the last one is why the role of the young people in fighting the pandemic differs from the rest. Now I'll use the opportunity, since Beatrice didn't have time to have an intervention in the last round. Do you think you can share some thoughts on the last questions? Why the young people's role and how they are, offering different approach when it comes to the fight against COVID? Over to you.
Thank you for the questions, Petra and Sarah. So I have maybe one answer that can accommodate some of the questions, which is, when we are talking about communication, there is a difference between information available and effective communication. And how do we know the difference between them? So to make an effective communication, we need to check the requirements on the other end. What does that mean? We have internet here, we have even telephone connection, satellite connection, we have radio, we have many of resources, but we need to consider that the other end, that many of the times the edge we are trying to contact, the edge we're trying to impact with our efforts and task forces, don't have any of those resources. So we need to come through those obstacles and make many of bridges to try to contact those edges that are not connected the way as we are. Does that take work? Yes, a lot of work. In the case of Brazil and many of the countries, we had to contact the local community radios. We have to telephone people about what would be like local influencers to talk to their communities about how to be safe and how to prevent, and even to establish a reward program so youth stakeholders and those communities could engage with our initiative and maybe build a resume or a CV, or even engage other opportunities based on what we were offering, on what we were building together. So checking the requirements on the other end is an important solution, and we need to be aware of that. About checking the resources and information, that's an educational job. That's why SDG 4 is so important, and also SDG 16, which is building peace and resilience and on our efforts, and SDG 17, the building partnerships and networks. If we have networks in which we can check information on, we can check sources on, we can even have someone to ask about them. So for example, we established in Brazil many WhatsApp numbers in which we can like message them and actually get an answer by what is the doubt and what is the fact checking they are needing to. So those are my comments on that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Beatrice. And with regards to the different sources of information, I noticed in the chat that Satvik has shared the list of reliable information sources that they've utilized. So I'd like to direct people to that as well to see. And now I'd like to open up to other panelists with regards to the questions that Peter proposed regarding fighting misinformation at different levels, and then online resources related to capacity building of young people in risk communication and community engagement. I would invite any of the panelists to just unmute themselves if they have something to share on either of those two questions.
I can jump in. For talking about, I did write down a list of all the resources and the information sources that we've utilized to develop Project COVID. But I think another important aspect that I want to share is there's a lot of microblogging websites out there. And, you know, we see all sorts of home remedies and myths about COVID-19 and ways that you could treat yourself, or, you know, conspiracy theories around it. So I would recommend to not really pay too much attention to those, because there is, in a digital age, always going to be an abundance of information, but only look at all these recognized sources, most of them that we've listed here, as well as some other medical journals and just reputed organizations that you could really trust. And apart from that, I think it's also equally important to open up conversations in your private lives, as some of the other panelists have spoken about before, to just, you know, if you see someone sharing misinformation or you get in a conversation with your friends and family about COVID-19 and you've read something that you think is reliable and trustworthy information for them to know as well, please share it, because while there is so much information, there's also a stark information gap that exists. And so our role as the youth, and just as people who do care about this world, is to basically open dialogue with one another and share this information when we come across it. So even if it's something as simple as just sharing a reliable article on Facebook, do it, because you never know who's watching and you never know who's reading and who it could help. That's all. Thank you.
Sarah, if I can come in for a second on this one.
Please do.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And it will come of no surprise that if you ask me from UNFPA what's the reliable source for information on COVID-19, we will turn to you, Sarah, and to WHO as being our fearless leader of the UN system in the fight against COVID-19, and the WHO guidelines are the ones which we really recommend we all follow. The UN has, together with WHO, but with us as well, created a whole campaign against misinformation around COVID-19, which is a real problem. Can you guys still hear me?
We can. Your video is frozen, but we can hear you well.
Okay, that's okay. So that's pretty clear to me where the right information can be found. However, I think it's absolutely critical that we educate young people, and we have young adults here, but we also look at adolescents when we talk about young people, that we educate them in knowing what is a reliable source of information. How do you navigate the online world? How do you find how do you track your sources? How do you find out fake news, etc.? This is not only an issue for COVID, but in general, the life skills which young people more and more need to acquire. And I think UNICEF, and Carla might say a word about this, has set out for some really good guidelines about how do you, for young people, specifically adolescents, on how to navigate that. And then my final point is, obviously the information out there is often, Savik, you talked about medical journals, etc. Definitely, this is reliable information in general, not always, but mostly, but very difficult to digest sometimes for younger audience. So you can go and surf by the Youth Compact website. We have tried to put a clearinghouse of information from our members, and specifically WHO information in a user-friendly way, which you can find and hopefully all in one place. And I think that the link to the website is in the chat box. Over.
Should I jump in quickly, Sarah, on this one as well? Very quickly on the resources specifically.
Sure, Carla.
So no, just to complement, I think this is a great question. I like the fact that people have asked it, because I think it's a need. I have written in the chat box, like if you scroll up, I have given 3 links where you can, one of them is where you can find a lot of resources. The one that Danielle just shared about the Youth Compact is another website where we have been also compiling a lot of resources. But I've also shared a particular link where young people can find 2 things. One is how to work with and for young people. And in that, it's a very elaborated guidelines on how to do the work, right? And it has many, many, many resources that they can just hyperlinks, basically, that they can easily actually click on, some of which are related to our CCE. And we have a separate guideline that we've developed specifically for our CCE, how to engage with young people and how to fight misinformation. Some practical tips, though. It's not a training module. Now, I think this is the beauty of this webinar. If we say, and if the young people are saying there is a need for a training, a full-fledged, module like session 1, how to fight misinformation, session 2, how to properly engage young people, session 3, how to fundraise for our initiatives, which is something that one of the youth panelists have brought up, and I've written it here as a major recommendation. I've been part of the youth network in my earlier years when I was a young person. And one of the big things that we were always asking for was give us tips on how to fundraise and become sustainable. And that is why it clicks in my head. So if there is a need for such a training, WHO, UNESCO, UNICEF, and UNFPA, we can do that as a follow-up to this webinar. Literally, we can organize 4 sessions if you agree, and whoever is interested can just join. That could be one of the follow-ups of this conversation for a more elaborated training.
Thanks very much, Carla.
Sarah?
Yeah, Sargis and May would like to say a few words. So, Sargis, do you want to speak quickly, and then we hand it?
Yeah, very quickly, just to say as well that about the project and the training, we recently with YPR have applied for with the European Commission for a project for mental health and COVID-19 anxiety management. So I think it's quite. We have also a lot of resources when it comes to mental health. And anxiety, and a lot of exercises and peer-to-peer approaches that could be used in order to tackle these issues. And I can also share a link for manual resources that could be maybe useful for other participants as well. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. May, over to you. I think we're going to have to wrap up fairly soon after that, as we're beginning to lose participants, unfortunately, but we're a bit over time. But May, over to you.
So just a quick note on finding misinformation, agreeing with what everyone else said, but I'd also urge us all to think, how can we engage youth in doing that? So those who has the most access and is most connected to young people themselves. So how can we engage as organizations or initiatives, young leaders, and support them in not only accessing this information, but spreading it to other young people? I think there's been plenty of good practices of how to do that, and there's still much more to still discover. The COVID-19 guidelines, I think, touches on that briefly as well, but really urge you to think from that perspective as well. How can we support young people to disseminate credited information to other youth in their communities?
Thank you so much. I think we're going to have to draw to an end now. It really has been an exciting and resourceful webinar. I think we've inspired a lot of people. I'm really excited that this is the beginning of a big collaboration, not just among UN agencies, but with young people, between young people. And so I'm thrilled to be a part of it. Saad, are you indicating you want to say something very quickly, and potentially you can be the last?
Exactly. Thank you very much, Sarah. The word or the question about why young people, what's special about young people, I want to say that what's really empowering about us is that we have the networking, we have the energy, we have the time, and also we don't have bureaucracy. If the ministry wants to start a program, it would take months before it starts. For us, if we want to work on a problem, we can go tomorrow and start doing action. So that's the power of youth, and this is why we should really act. And when it comes to networking, we can go to media, we can go to different stakeholders and to the community and engage them. And this is why what we hope today, that all the participants here are getting some energy and motivation. And I'm sure that Sarah will share all the useful resources by email. So make sure to follow us and engage. Start by filling the survey, and we hope that you can engage on COVID and misinformation.
Thank you so much, Saad. So I think in follow-up, we will be sending an email to everybody who registered for this webinar. We can share the presentation, we can share the recording, and links to, we can try and draw out from the Zoom chat all the links that have been shared, and we can do some follow-up with the actions. Carla's already promised to lead on something like that. So thanks, Carla, and we look forward to being involved. Thank you to all the panelists for everything that you're doing and for being a part of the webinar. Really thrilled to have you, and stay safe, everybody, and keep up all the great work.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you, everyone.